Why creatives starve. Creative people are passionate about their craft. They are determined to create something unique for the world. And yet, a lot of them starve. A lot of them do not succeed in their pursuit of creative genius, of creative mastery. And why is this? Well, you see it with a lot of artists. They don't become famous until they pass away or some sort of luck strikes their situation. Most of the time, creatives are starving. And it starts off with undervaluation. A lot of creatives are just creating for the fun of it. Vincent van Gogh never really was a salesperson and never really valued his work. I think it was his brother that pushed his work out there into the world. But Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, I'm not sure the appropriate pronunciation, but we'll go with Van Gogh. Van Gogh essentially was living in poverty his entire life, even though having created masterpieces of art. He just simply did not value what he was doing, or he wasn't self-confident, right? In order to properly value what you're doing, you need to have some self-confidence that what you're doing is of value, right? Because if you don't value what you're doing, well, then you will always starve. If you don't see the value in it, who else is going to? And that's always the challenge. Now, I run into this all the time because, I have I have almost 70 books now. And what I've noticed is that I continually lower the prices without giving my books a shot, without really promoting them, because I don't feel comfortable asking for money. I don't feel comfortable with that idea at all. So I don't. I never really ask for money. And this just seems to be a common occurrence among creatives. You can look at musicians as well. Musicians will create new music. They will do songwriting. They will perform, but then they will ask for absolutely nothing in return. They're so excited about their craft that the reality is they don't really get anything for it. They don't really tell people that, hey, I'm worth something. I'm worth it, right? And this is why they all sort of starve. Another reason why creatives will starve is perhaps a psychological barrier, something holding them back. Now, this psychological barrier can also be a catalyst for amazing creations, right? Some of the most depressive people in the world are also the most creative. That's just the reality. I mean, if you look at a number of all the different amazing people in history, you'll see a lot of them maybe had a bit more of that darker mind. But that was where their greatest work had shone through. But what happens is this can sometimes get in the way of creativity. This darkness can slow someone down to the point of not being able to create, to not having a smooth rhythm in terms of creative action. So this is a common issue as well among creatives, is that they're continually isolated, continually lonely, and they are struggling to perhaps create an identity for themselves. So, addressing this darkness, addressing anything that's maybe slowing them down, any self-doubt, negative thinking, all of that should get addressed. But creatives are so immersed in what they're doing that they're not really thinking about self-care per se. So this is another catalyst for starvation, is not handling those dark thoughts. And a lot of careers are cut short, or lives are ended too soon because these creative people go into a spiraling, out of control darkness towards this abyss that they cannot recover from. So you see a lot of people in their late 20s, early 30s, they're doing drug overdoses or substance abuses, and that's it. Life terminated. And some of the greatest artists in the world, Jimi Hendrix, Chris Farley, John Belushi, you see all of these people who passed away at a very young age. A lot of rock star musicians passed away. You got the drummer John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. All these people, they passed away in their 30s, early 30s, because of these dark thoughts. And, well, you could argue that they were financially successful, right? They were financially successful, absolutely, and they were young. But they were starving in terms of perhaps meaning in life, perhaps a point in living. Because if they had any desire to live, they maybe would have not have done this. But they got to a point where things were just intolerable. And that's what can happen with this darkness. It can kind of pull you down. And it's a scary thing. And it can starve you. It can definitely starve you. Maybe not in the sense financially, but in the sense psychologically. Because, well, financial starvation isn't really as critical as maybe emotional starvation or psychological starvation. Those are much more concerning to me. Because financially, you can always go and get a job. That's an easy solution. But psychologically, it might not be an easy fix. No. So there's a lot of that particular type of starvation. Why else do creatives starve? Well, it could be that they're doing the things that people don't want. You see, you take a risk out there. You take a risk out there when you decide you want to be creative. You want to do something different. You want to be unique in the world. The problem with this is you put yourself out there and you don't know if things will be successful. You have a high degree of openness to experiences that might not generate any kinds of returns, and that results in starvation. Because there might maybe several experiments, maybe hundreds, thousands of experiments that you do as a creative person, and a lot of them will fail. And you have to be willing to accept the fact that you will generate zero returns for what you produce. And you have to be okay with that. A lot of filmmakers, for instance, might start off with several indie movies that do not produce results until they find that breakthrough. But it could take years, decades, before they finally figure it out. And in that entire process, there is starvation. Creative people have a lot of different ideas, a lot of different things they want to tackle. And some creatives dwell on a number of different things and never focus on something to the point of mastery, to the point of truly excelling, to the point where people are willing to pay. And as a result, they always put out a product that maybe is not 100%. It is not 100% perfect. It is 90% there. And in this world, you have to be in the top 5% if you want to approach something creatively. You might have to really niche down into a specific area that compels you, where you can truly master it. Because there aren't too many top violinists out there. So if you want to be the top, you might have to devote a lifetime to getting there. And a lot of creatives might not be able to get there. Or they will starve in trying to get there. And that is the reality. Another reason for this starvation is a lack of personal story. And as someone who is truly passionate about marketing and truly passionate about your story, if you don't have something compelling to tell the world, no one will latch on to what you're doing. That's why a lot of these musicians, they have like a coming of age story that they share, and it draws people in. If you look at, well, let's bring up a musician like Post Malone. He's a rapper who's really popular these days. Well, back in the day, he was creating things, but he wasn't taking life seriously, and he was sort of just doing things for the fun of it, but he never really took it to the next level. One day he decided to take things seriously because he had no choice. He had to get going. He's tired of being told that he wasn't good enough. That's a common theme among creatives, is being told you're not good enough. And the question is how do you rise above it? Well, Post Malone rose above it, and he excelled, and he built a story out of it. And that's a compelling story because people want to see the phoenix rising from the ashes. That is a very strong personal story. And creatives would be best served to come up with a story like that and communicate that story. That's what will sell tickets, that will sell artwork, that will sell what it is you're trying to sell. People do latch on to a personal story because they have a struggle in their lives and they want to feel connected to someone else's struggles. And if all creatives can come up with this struggle, can come up with this very difficult piece in their life, trying to get over obstacles, that is what will get an emotional connection. And in this world of trying to stand out, your personal story is really the only thing that can make you stand out. If you don't have a personal story, you will starve. You will be mixed in with the rest of the crowd. So figuring out that story, I think, is really important. It's important to tell people that story. And you might not think that that story is important enough. You might think that that story is irrelevant and that people will not connect. Well, someone out there might. And you need to tell people this story. Now, I see a lot of people just trying to blatantly push their stuff out there. They're just trying to push it as hard as they can to just drown the masses with their creativity. It may or may not work, but it's forced. And you don't really want to force what you're trying to do out into the world. You want to tell people about your story. And if people care enough, and some people will, they'll look into who you are, and they'll find out what you're all about, and they'll look into your journey, and they'll explore your situation. You don't have to push too hard. And creatives maybe focus too much on the hard push, the hard sell. Instead, they should maybe focus on that emotion, the connection, the human behind them. Because that is what is interesting. That is what will hopefully get a creative out of starvation. So, I've done a lot of videos on creatives in the past, different ways to stand out, different ways to get your name out there. I think this applies for entrepreneurs as well, because entrepreneurs can starve as well if they can't figure out how to get new clients, get new users. A lot of it is a self-confidence thing. A lot of it is that. But yeah, I've done quite a few videos on this. So, you can definitely check them out. And I think the most important thing, beyond the common just keep creating, I get that a lot. Well, look, you can keep creating for the rest of your life and maybe nobody will ever find out who you are. So I think it's beyond just creating, okay? I think it's beyond that, because there's hundreds of other people, thousands of other people who are continuing to create and don't exist, right? They don't exist and they're starving. So you have to look beyond that and say, what's my story? What's this connection that I can build with my audience? Because if you can figure that out, then you might be able to get out of starvation, you see. And that's what you want to do. You want to get out of starvation. I think that's so critical. I think it's so critical because going forward, we're going to have more and more creative people because they have no choice. Maybe they've lost their jobs or whatnot, and creativity is the only way out of starvation. And having that self-confidence, I think, is going to be critical. I think that's it. That's all I got for this one. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Toodles.